Hello everyone! I'm still in Rome. Recently I showed you the very heart of ancient Rome. Today we leave the city and head to the Roman countryside. The iconic, most famous road of antiquity, Via Appia, an over 2,000-year-old route that is also a vast ancient cemetery. Join me to explore ancient Roman tombs. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please press the subscribe button on the bottom right corner. Thank you. Let's go! Via Appia is like a great necropolis, dotted with tombstones found on both sides of the road, practically at every step, smaller ones of the less wealthy and monumental ones belonging to the nobility. Here's the first one, known as the Tomb of Rabirii.
We can see here beautiful relief depicting the owner of the tomb, his wife, and a priestess.
Although it shows three figures, it appears to be divided into two parts. The first shows Gaius and his wife Rabirii, their heads turned slightly to the left, their faces much more serious and realistic than Usia Primas, the priestess of Isis, who is looking in the opposite direction and is smiling softly. An Egyptian sistrum is carved next to her head. It's a characteristic instrument connected with the cult of the goddess. And indeed, the two characters on the left were carved in the 1st century BC, whereas Usia's portrait was added in the 1st century AD and most likely was obtained from the reworking of a male bust in a toga prepared beforehand. What's even more interesting, Gaius and Rabirii weren't of high status. They were freedmen of Rabirio Postumus, a Roman banker and merchant. Oh, by the way, along the Via Appia we can see huge mausoleums of the richest Romans. Some of them we can enter, but there's an absolute ban on filming. But I managed to film one of them for you anyway. If you want to see what's inside, stay with me. Death was unclean for the Romans. Burial inside the city was specifically prohibited by the law. No burial or cremation of a corpse shall take place in a city. As Cicero puts it, to avoid the physical and ritual pollution of the living by the dead. Unlike today, easily accessible, busy roads like this, where passers-by could see the tombs and remember their owners, were the most preferred places for burial. The tomb of Rabirii, as well as the one we see right now, features many characteristics of the freedmen tombs. The bodies are very similar and only the heads are unique, as the portraits were often purchased in bulk and the faces were added later. An inexpensive and accessible way to depict the tomb owners as they wanted to be remembered. Deceased often wanted to look older, as respectability and age were highly valued by Roman society. The average age of death was 30, thus wrinkles and furrowed brows were underlined or simply added. These features also emphasized the hardships the freedmen had to endure to attain their freedom. We find here many remains of traditional forms of burial, usually commissioned by the ancient middle or high middle class, the family graves called columbaria, like this one here, where urns with ashes were placed. However, in Hadrian's time there was a sudden fashion for carved sarcophagi. Cremation was gradually abandoned, although not completely, because still sometimes ashes were found inside instead of bodies, as the sarcophagi were generally perceived and used as manifestation of wealth. Both forms of burial were practiced in parallel already by the Etruscans, so it has nothing to do with the influence of Jews or Christians. Interestingly, here along the Appian Way 2 mummies were discovered. Egyptian in style, they even featured characteristic colorful masks. We're all familiar with the phrase, "all roads lead to Rome." The Appian Way was the first and the most important of the great roads that began the fame of Rome as the best connected city of antiquity.
The Appian Way, in Latin Via Appia, although it sounds feminine, its name derives from the name of the Roman politician Appius Claudius Caecus,
who was the Roman censor and commissioned the road in 312 BC as a result of a long-lasting military conflict between Rome and the Samnites. It all began in around 340 BC, when Rome wanted to ally with Capua, around 200 kilometers southeast of Rome, inhabited mainly by the Etruscans. The city wasn't, however, independent. Around a century earlier, in 424 BC, Capua was seized by the Samnites, a tribe from the mountainous center of South Italy, north of Capua, south of Rome. And as you can imagine, the Samnites didn't like the idea of Capua entering into an alliance with Rome. After the First Samnite War, 340–341 BC, Romans realized that they couldn't effectively deploy troops, move their equipment and supplies, mainly because of the difficult, narrow, ancient route Via Latina, as well as malarial swamps between Capua and Rome. A wider and straight road was needed, hence the construction of a new one, which in time became the first ancient superhighway. The Samnites were eventually defeated after the Second Samnite War in 304 BC. Via Appia was the most impressive of all ancient roads. Its first section, commissioned by Caecus, ended in Capua, but less than a century later, in 264 BC, Via Appia reached the main harbour in Brindisi, on the coast of the Adriatic Sea, from where one could travel to Greece and to the east. In the 2nd century AD, the Emperor Trajan added a shorter route from Benevento, 50 kilometers from Naples, which allowed to cover a distance of around 540 kilometers in less than 2 weeks. For many centuries it served as the main road leading to Rome, and witnessed Roman legions moving east, merchants heading towards the city, but it also saw quite a gruesome event. In 71 AD, 6,000 slaves, rebelled by Spartacus, were crucified along the Appian Way. From the structural point of view, the Appian Way is ingenious. A dirt road was firstly leveled and then covered by 3 layers accordingly: statumen, crushed rock; rudus, gravel in cement mortar; nucleus, cemented sand and gravel. On top, tightly fitting large stone boulders were placed, summum dorsum. In the middle, the road was designed to be slightly convex and feature parallel ditches. Both these features were to ensure effective water drainage. The road measured around 4.5 meters in width, enough for 2 carts to pass each other or for 5 soldiers to march alongside one another. We have to stop for a while. Perks of the countryside. Today, there's not much left of the original structure, but we know that almost 1,000 years after its construction, the road's condition was still praised, for example, by a Byzantine historian, Procopius. Quote, "The road itself is worthy of the highest admiration for the stone of which it is composed. They, boulders, are so accurately fitted and joined together as to present the appearance of one compact mass, naturally united and not composed of many parts." Unquote. The rich and powerful Romans also built their residences along the Appian Way. The Quintili Villa was commissioned by the Quintili brothers, both appointed consuls in 151 AD. Here are remains of the Nymphaeum, which served as an entrance to this enormous estate. The villa was immense. It featured parks, avenues, temples, baths, hippodrome, and even its own aqueduct. The estate, in fact, was so large that when discovered in the 18th century, it was thought to have been a city and got the name Roma Vecchia, the Old Rome. The Emperor Commodus, most likely jealous of the brothers' immense wealth, put them to death in 182 AD on the accusation of conspiracy, of course, and confiscated all their property. Let's try to imagine what a stroll down the Appian Way would look like 2,000 years ago. Tombs encased in a light marble or terracotta, decorated with wreaths covered with flower petals, offerings of bread sprinkled with wine, and fragrant oils left nearby. At dusk, we would see the light of oil lamps. Perhaps a little scary image, but also truly picturesque and mesmerizing, don't you think? The Casal Rotondo, the largest circular tomb on the Appian Way, 35 meters in diameter, dates back to the end of the 1st century BC. The brick wall, featuring pieces of marble found in the vicinity of the funerary structure, was erected by the tomb's excavator, Luigi Canina, in the 19th century. He believed that the mausoleum was commissioned by a senator, Aurelius Cotta Messallinus, for his father, a Roman general. This assumption was based on one of the marble pieces which was inscribed with one word only, Cotta, but modern scholars are rather skeptical and ascribe the piece to another, much smaller funerary monument. The practical reason behind burial outside the city is clear. Rome was densely inhabited, and burials in the city would have significantly increased the risk of diseases. Besides, cremation was quite popular then, and again, Cicero hypothesized that the implemented law was to prevent burning the whole city down. From the religious point of view, the Pomerium, Rome and the cities controlled by it, was perceived as consecrated land. Moreover, the gods, the deathless creatures dwelling in the temples, could have felt offended at the sight of a dead body and bring misfortune upon the city. The 21-meter-high mausoleum of Caecilia Metella is the best example of a lavish and monumental tomb which only the most affluent ones could afford. Just to mention, white travertine, in which it was encased, was the most expensive building material available at that time. Cecilia was a daughter of a consul and probably married a son of the famous Licinius Crassus, who not only was a member of the famous First Triumvirate with Caesar and Pompey, but was known as the richest man in Rome, hence the grandeur of the tomb and the resemblance to the mausoleum of Augustus. Neighboring Cecilia's tomb is another enormous estate known as the Villa of Maxentius. Maxentius, the son of Emperor Maximian, seized the city by force in 306, distanced himself from the Tetrarchy, settled in Rome, and tried to start a new era of a united empire. Wanting to improve weakened and plunged in chaos Rome, which was losing its political significance to other centers such as Trier or Milan, he initiated the construction of, among others, a giant basilica on the Forum, which I showed you in the previous episode. Conservator Orbis Suum, the preserver of the city, restored and rebuilt the central part of Rome, but decided to build his palace complex on the Appian Way. It consists of a palace on the hill, a chariot racing circus, and a cylindrical mausoleum, known as the Mausoleum of Romulus. Let's get inside the tomb. The mausoleum measures around 34 meters in diameter and when completed was a two-story structure encased with marble slabs with circular corp and rectangular pronaos and an entrance facing the Appian Way. It looked quite similar to the Pantheon, but only its vestibule and crypt survived to our times. After 6 tumultuous years of conflict with the Tetrarchs, one of them, Constantine, marched on Rome to deal with the usurper. Maxentius decided to fight at the Milvian Bridge near Rome, where he fell. Constantine's army entered Rome with Maxentius' head impaled on a stake. It was during this battle that Constantine the Great converted to Christianity and later briefly restored the splendor and unity of the empire. Maxentius intended to be interred here as the first from his lineage, but his son Romulus, who died prematurely, probably was buried here already in 309 AD. Hence, the structure is also known as the Mausoleum of Romulus. By the way, I mentioned in my previous episode about the Roman Forum that Maxentius might have buried his son there. It shows us that although the history of Rome is one of the best recorded, there are still questions without answers. We're in a round crypt. It features one additional entrance at the rear end. The sun rays entered through the front entrance at sunset during the winter solstice, and through the rear entrance at dawn during the summer solstice. The central pillar features niches in which the imperial sarcophagi were to be placed. The mausoleum is situated at the center of a rectangular open space, enclosed by more than 10-meter-high walls. Their inner side once featured a portico with cross vaults. Of course, the biggest attraction on the Appian Way are the huge underground catacombs, such as San Sebastian or St. Callisto. I visited them all, but filming inside is completely forbidden, and one can enter only with a guide. I would have to apply for a special permission in the Vatican, to which the catacombs belong, and I'll try, because these underground cities of death are truly amazing. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like and leave a comment to continue our journey through ancient sites. In the meantime, check out my other videos from Egypt, Greece and Turkey. And if you'd like to support my project, join my Patreon community. Link in the description. See you on another ancient site.